Okay, now I'd like to go to Hangman Creek's Diorama with owner Jess Dozier. This is a gorgeous module. And Jeff, I really do appreciate you doing this. I've had some emails that are so positive about this. And when we broke this up from our regular show last week, uh, just your segment of that show has had a tremendously large number of viewers view what you did. So I know there's a lot of interest in dioramas, and we're seeing it by the number of people that I'm hearing from directly, as well as the number of people that are viewing your segment. So thanks so much for doing this.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. So can everybody hear me okay? I think we had audio trouble last time, so I try to make sure we're
You're
good.
good.
All
You're
right.
good.
Okay, so now we're kind of, we're slowly progressing because we're not really doing much diorama stuff yet. It's dioramas are like building blocks, right? You have a bunch of components and then, it's like Legos, and then eventually poof, they become a building, right? And a good diorama or any diorama, the ones, I really study a lot of military modelers, is that they focus on every little piece of diorama. They do it the best they can. And then when everything comes together, you end up with you end up with a pretty cool thing, right? So I wanted to share the logboat from last week. And I don't know how well this is going to show up, just quality of camera and such, but if anybody's on the show last week, I think I did this in probably less than 5 minutes. I mean, it was quick, right? I had timed it. And then I literally had a kind of a chalk mixture, different pigments, the pigments that are the starch base that, Bragdon cells and the old AIM, they're everywhere. And I literally just sprayed it real quick and dipped it in that chalk and sort of sprinkled the chalk around. And, we didn't really have time to see the results, but after it dries and it really does cure, and it cures pretty instantly, but for something that took a few minutes, really quick, it's shockingly realistic. And what I like about it is that it doesn't, it's just a process, right? It's not, I didn't have to sit here and go ding, 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 and, be all crazy perfect. If anything, I want to do the opposite, because that's what nature does. Nature's random over the course of years. It adds layers and texture. But I got to do a little touch up on the boat. I haven't touched it since our last call, but overall, it came out pretty good. I'm going to do a little bit along the edges up here and, where it would have had some maybe, natural rub lines where they worked on it or whatever. But so that one's pretty much, it's close. Okay. The next really item I'm trying to get through is I want to get through all the wood. And the wood, I in this case, it's resin, right? And so really easy to make resin look like wood. It's, again, process based. So I want to focus on this week is just sort of the process and the steps, and then I'll complete it over the course of the week so we can actually get closer to start putting some stuff together here pretty quick, right? So this is one of the bridge stringers. It's cast resin piece. Basically, the way it actually goes on the diorama is that the bridge plates go across, or the bridge ties go across, and so you only work on the part that's visible, but this has just been spray painted tan. And then this one, I want this to look pretty aged and beat up. It's an old beat up trestle. And then what I've done is I've hit this with Silverwood, our friend Silverwood Builders and Scale. I think a lot of folks know them. Alcohol ink really works the same way. Silverwood is just a stronger version of that. It evaporates, it leaves a little bit more of a stain than just traditional India ink and alcohol. But it goes a long ways. So in this case, I want kind of that old gray aged wood. Some of these other pieces that are part of it, I want to make sure I have some of that brown natural wood, tone, as well as that dark gray. And that's really easy to replicate. I just use artist acrylics. I've had these forever. I mean, we're talking 15 years. A little dollop goes a long ways. These are just right out of Michael's. And what I did is I just put a couple little dabs in, maybe not even a quarter of a teaspoon. And then I just added water to make a little wash. And this is just, I think you had Tom York on your show, but this is a lot of the kind of process that he did for years, and you learn from. But again, really simple. All I'm doing on this wood is I'm trying to get some random colors, not painting. And huge here on the don't paint is it's a really, like, it's almost not even going to show hardly any color. You're going to be like, why am I doing this? There's nothing here. But you just literally put it on random boards. And I think you can see a little bit of that color differential there, right, in that board. And I just do 3 or 4 tones. Try not to do too many. And I just wash these on and I let them evaporate. And a couple times of this, it sort of builds up this nice random color and it looks really natural. But the key is not to paint it on. You want it to the point that you're almost going, am I really getting anything on here? Okay. So this is the last little part we're gonna, I think we'll have time to work on tonight. And then, but I think everyone's heard of dry brushing, right? Pretty common way to finish off details, and really dry brushing is, you know, simple, pretty simple technique. Takes a little bit of practice, but it really brings everything to life. And what it is, it's basically dry brushing is to use either a white or an off-white, and basically put just a little bit down and then wipe it off until you've almost got rid of all the paint. And then just to very lightly catch raised edges where the sun would hit. And what it does is it basically is just a way to trick our brains, because we're not outside, we're inside. And light doesn't work the same way inside a hobby room. And it's just a great way to highlight detail. And so I don't know how well you can see that pretty well, right? Yep. So, I mean, it just looks like a piece of wood, right? It's gray. You know, this is the deck, the boat deck. But we're going to do a real quick dry wash on this, and I want to show you how quick the difference is, because it's pretty cool. And it's really hard. You can't screw it up, because if you do too much, you either wipe it off or you just go back and stain over it and do it again. All right, am I doing okay on time, Jim? I think I am.
Yes, sir. Take your time.
All right.
Go right ahead.
So this requires a, you don't want a real super soft brush. Okay, but you also don't want something, you know, like you don't want something like this that is just completely floppy, but you also want a broad end or a flat end works really good. I have a tendency to whack these with scissors every now and again to get them, because I'm always messing them up a little bit. But pretty straightforward. I'm really going to take this, dab this into this white. I'm sure you can see it. We'll try. And then literally, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to dab it on the end, and I'm going to wipe most of it off. So you end up with this little brush that has a little bit on it, but boy, not very much. And then this is the part that you just got to practice. And I put my, when I do this, because, you know, like, I don't have the steadiest hands in the world. I get myself anchored, and I just basically usually brush diagonally across, and I just kind of work across. What you're trying to avoid doing is creating lines, but all you're trying to do is just touch the top of the wood surface, and you can a finger with some gloves on is your best friend here. And I just want to show you the difference here, because it's pretty, I hope it'll show up on the screen really well, and the edges are a great place to do things. And I do this even if I'm going to cover most of this log deck is going to get covered, but I don't want to have to try to figure out what I'm going to cover, what I'm not going to cover, right? But I don't know, let's see, hopefully you can see the difference. Now, that's a little stark now, okay? I'm going to go back, and I can do that almost immediately. I'm going to hit it with a little more alcohol India ink mixture to let that settle into crevices. But what's going to remain is a little bit of this white on these raised edges. And it really, especially from any kind of distance away, it really makes the detail pop, okay? And I pretty much dry brush anything where a surface will hit it. Even when this log boat actually goes on the diorama, I'll go back and I literally will do a very, very light dry brush, even on the edge of the boat. Now, because all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to highlight that detail, make it stand out a little bit. It's fine scale miniatures, you're all famous George Cellulose, right? This is something that George Cellulose does to everything. And, you know, you've seen George's work, it's insane. So if George does it, it's got to be good, right? So then just go back, and I've got my 15-year-old bottle of the alcohol India ink here that I keep adding to. I'd be lost if I ever lost the thing, because it's seasoned. It's kind of like, you know, our whiskey bottles, right? It's seasoned, our whiskey glass. You don't ever want to wash it. And I just go back and hit it a little bit again with that alcohol India ink. It'll settle into the crevices and it'll leave the majority of that dry brushing. And it's real easy to go back. And if you do too much, you can wipe off your finger. If you don't do enough, you can go back. But there's a big difference in this from a foot away, even doing this. So what I'm going to work on the next week is to go through and finish all the wood and, you know, just get it 100% done. It's really hard to dry brush and to do finished detail work when something is almost done. You can go back and do a little bit, but I like to do everything separately, and then that way put it together, and then I can make adjustments, because it's hard to do it once you're in there. And I'll even go back, and this is still a little bit wet, right? I think you can see it's got a pretty good shine to it. But once this evaporates off, I'll go back and I'll dry brush these edges. I'll do a little bit through here on the raised surfaces, and then I'll go back and hit it with that alcohol ink. And then, you know, we'll call this basically ready for the next step. So I think that's pretty much it for today. So I'll knock out the wood this week, and next week we'll probably knock out the cast scenery forms. There's a couple pieces of hydrocal, and then basically it's the finishing the logboat and the motor. And once we, you know, once we get those components done, there's an outhouse, but, you know, we'll work through those because it's the same technique. So I don't think I'll go through, you know, I may go through some of the subtle things that are different about those, but then within, you know, probably a couple shows, we'll have all the pieces together, and we'll get after getting this diorama, the scenery, get into the fun stuff and get it put together. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Jess?
Yeah, hi, Jess. This is Greg. When you were first showing the boat, you said you sprayed it before you put on the pigments, but I might have missed. What did you spray it with?
Yeah, so the boat started life just my resin boat, right? And what I did is I primed it and I cleaned it first. And when I clean stuff, I use soap, because it has mold release. Almost all resin, that especially if you want your resin, your molds to last, use resin. But paint will not stick to mold release. It's right. Or it may seem like it's sticking, but then a year down the road, if you bump it, it'll just come off. So washed it and I primed it. Tan Krylon. I use the cheap camouflage Krylon. It's very, very flat. And for whatever reason, because it's flat, it's very porous. And so it takes stain and things stick to it very well. So prime the boat, let that sit for a few days. I like to work really quickly, but I just like put it away and get it away from myself. So I gotta let it cure. And then all I did is I sprayed it with with black paint, painter's touch. Now, I think, and the only reason I didn't use flat was I'm out. Normally I'd have flat, but it doesn't really matter, right? You just want to use any kind of spray paint, because really what you're doing is that black. I'm trying to have that black end up as my base. So that way the chalk adheres, and then wherever I want to rub it off or brush it off, that black intermingles with the chalk. And then you end up, you know, with basically like almost like a, you know.
Okay, but you would let the black dry before you were putting the pigment. Oh, while it was wet. Okay, that's what I was curious about.
Literally, it's messy. It's stone cold wet. You have to do it wet, because that is the only way for the chalk to adhere to it. And actually, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's got texture.
Yeah, that's the beauty of chalks and pigments and stuff.
Yep.
Okay, and that's what I was curious about. If you had sprayed it with just water or an adhesive or paint or.
Yeah, and I tried adhesive once, and that was a freaking disaster, to be quite honest.
Okay, thanks. I won't.
Yeah, paints, and the front of this thing right here. I don't know, this like right here. I don't know if you can see the side of that, but it's got a ton of texture.
Yeah, yeah, you can see it with the light reflecting.
Yeah, and the paint was a little mottled
Mhm.
because, it was, I sprayed it quick and so it had a little, it was starting to move. But that dumping that chocolate instantly, it instantly adheres and leaves that texture. And really, if you look at a boat, rust builds over time.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jess.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Jess, thanks so much for being here this evening. I really do appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to it too.